Africa many hundreds years ago, no, close to 1,000 years ago. This was about 700 years ago when they started coming to Africa in the 13th century, right? First of all, the attraction, was, the lands and the people, right? So they were like, okay, people like Christopher Columbus, told the crown in England that there are other, regions, other continents. At the time, they were not called continents. Actually, he was just let them know that there were other people living in other parts of the land across the big, body of water, right? And so people like him sought for sponsorship to go discover these places. So it's funny that Christopher Columbus today is said to have discovered many American countries, many, regions around the world. My question is, how do you discover a place that people have always lived, right? Mm-hmm. But anyway, that's the lies of history. And so they said Christopher Columbus discovered this, discovered that, discovered this country, discovered the other country. Now, my point is, they came over to Africa, found that our people were hardworking. They needed manual labor. They needed human force for their farmlands, right? And so they began to steal our people and transport them across the Atlantic, to the many Caribbean countries where they had sugarcane plantations, right? Mm-hmm. They moved Africans to America, to Jamaica, to Barbados, to Suriname, to just name it, all of those Caribbean countries. They moved other slaves to Europe, right? Okay. And what these Africans did for them was farm their lands. Later, these Africans were used to construct their cities as well. And so these are our own brothers and sisters who were stolen away in slavery. And that's why today you have many black people in countries like America, Canada, and all of the Caribbean, right? Now, having said that, it is important that you understand that right from that time, Africa was designated an economic zone, right? So they came here for our human resources. Now, a couple of years after the human resource fetched them so much money, it translated into natural resources because, of course, they discovered that Africa had gold, Africa had diamonds, Africa had uranium, just name it. Africa is the last frontier. The wealthiest continent in the world is Africa. And so those white people discovered that we had all of that. And so they decided that stealing our people was not enough for them. So they decided they were going to come and lord over us. So they became colonial masters, right? Mm-hmm. From transporting slaves and, Christianizing us. How do you say that thing now? They sent missionaries as well to come and turn us from traditional African religionists to Christians, right? Okay, it's a good thing that today we have become Christians. But then they decided it wasn't just enough to send slaves across the ocean, that they were going to become our colonial masters. So they made themselves governors and prime ministers and presidents and divided Africa. In 1886, I believe it was, they had the Berlin Conference and they divided Africa amongst many European so-called superpowers. And so that's why Africa has different borders. Now, I paint a clear picture. Mm-hmm. If you go to Lagos, if you go to Western Nigeria, now some parts of Western Nigeria borders some parts of Benin Republic. Right? Okay. Now, these are two Yoruba. If you go there, it's funny. It's funny really how this wickedness happened. Now, the Yoruba tribe overflows right into Benin Republic, but one is French and one is English, right? Andreas came in and divided them, and so called this side Benin Republic and called this side Nigeria. Now, today, these Yoruba people in Benin Republic and these Yoruba people in Nigeria do not see eye to eye. And yet they are one people, one Yoruba tribe, one people. Prior to the coming of the white man, these people were one people. But now, because of geographics and European politics, they divided these people and made them enemies, right? So these are some of the negative effects of colonialism. But what I'm trying to talk about today is, I chose the topic, how predicting IMF and World Bank use predatory lendings to, cripple African economies. Yeah. So how does this happen? Now, they supposedly give us independence in the 1960s. But of course, they knew that they could not do without African human resource and natural resources. So actually, when they give us independence, they actually switched to what they call, if you studied government or you studied politics in the university, you know that at some point they switched to what we call indirect rule. So that is to say, we're giving you independence supposedly to rule yourselves, but we will rule you indirectly. So that's how they move into indirect rule. Now, indirect rule means that they're now using economic means to still hold you under, right? Now, if you were totally independent, that means that you're supposed to control your natural resources. You're supposed to control your finances. You're supposed to control your money. You're supposed to control your economic policies. You're supposed to control your central bank. But I can tell you today that there's hardly any African country that has total control of their economy. There is hardly any African country. There's hardly any black nation in the world, not just in Africa. Jamaica, Haiti, Suriname, just name it. Every black nation in the world, there is hardly anyone today that's a superpower. There's hardly anyone that controls their economy verbatim, right? And this is because of this wicked influence of the West on black nations, right? So look at what's happening. They want to make sure that they control everything you have. That's why I've been trying to call your attention, you the listeners, to what I've been saying about this. Nigeria is blessed with many natural resources. The only country I think is richer or wealthier than Nigeria in the world in terms of natural resources is Congo DRC. Congo DRC is the wealthiest nation in terms of natural resources. They have it all, right? Congo DRC has a mineral that was discovered not too long ago, stones, that actually when you touch them together, they spark and they produce light, right? They have cobalt, they have lithium, right? And of course, Nigeria has lithium as well. So these are the two major owners of wealth in Africa. There are so many countries that have many resources, but Nigeria and Congo are the richest. Now, the West understands that the day they let you self-determine, the day they let you own your economy and make your policies, their standard of living will go down, because that means they will start depending on you for probably finished goods, right? And so what have they decided to do? They decide to give you monies that you didn't ask for as a way to trap you. That's something they say in Igbo, but they also say universally that he that feeds you or owns you, right? Mm-hmm. So they devise the means to make sure that Africa will forever be indebted to the West. And so that's why IMF was created. That's not necessarily why the World Bank was created. But these two organizations work together to hold Africa down. So what are they doing? They work in tandem with corrupt African politicians. Ask yourself why. Every time Nigeria has an election cycle, every politician goes to London. Ask yourself, why do they go to London all the time? Mm-hmm. Every time, every single one of them, Buhari did it. This current president did it. The one before that one did it, right? It's all about debriefing. If you really want to win, you have to go to London. London is an economic capital. There are many economic centers in the world and financial centers in the world. London is one of them. Hong Kong is one of them. New York is one of them, right? Now, these are where regions where the economies of the world are controlled. So they go to London to actually go sell themselves. And it's at these trips that they actually tell you, these Western powers tell you what they need you to do. If you agree to play by their balls, you sign a contract with them and they support your campaign. They will spare no dollar to make sure that you get into office, because when you get into office, you will now protect their interest. And so this was why this government was told by the IMF to make sure that you eliminate subsidies. Obasanjo was told to eliminate subsidies. He refused. Jonathan tried it. There was a stiff challenge, and he pulled back and he did not eliminate subsidies. Buhari's government was told to eliminate subsidies. But these people knew that it will cause undue hardship on Nigerians, and they refused to eliminate it, right? Mm-hmm. Now, this man came in, he went to London, they debriefed him, they told him, you've got to eliminate subsidy. And that's why the first day in office, the day of his inauguration, he eliminated subsidies to please IMF. Now, why is IMF so interested in the elimination of subsidies, you may ask? IMF understands that when you eliminate subsidies, inflation will, begin a free a free hike, your country's economy will die, right? Okay, let's paint a picture now. Chiamaka, I need a loan, and you give me $1,000, right? Loan. And when you gave me this $1,000, a dollar was changing at 100 naira, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that means that 100 naira times 1,000 gives you how much now? Probably 100,000, right? Naira, right? I don't know if that arithmetic was correct, but see the point I'm trying to make here. Then all of a sudden, you decide to devalue the naira because you have the power, right? And the way you decided to do that was to make sure that we eliminate something like subsidies, which will skyrocket everything and make sure that the value of naira goes down. And that's what they've done. The value of the naira has gone down. So now, the money I borrowed at 100 naira per dollar is now at 1,600 per dollar. So that means that where I would have owed you 100,000, now I'm owing you $1 million plus. And that $1 million plus that I'm now owing you was not the rate it was when I borrowed that money. So that means now I'm struggling actually to pay you, right? And the economy isn't working. So what this means that I'm going to owe you longer than we intended. So you're going to come around and say, Oga, this money you're owing me is too much now. So it's either you give me my money or you give me resources. So that means you have a farm. Let's say you have a cassava farm. So I'm now telling you, madam, I can't really pay you right now because I'm not making that money. You will now say, okay, I own the cassava. You will say, give me some of your cassava. Then you decide that you're going to take half of my cassava and we renegotiate the contract. So you're going to tell me now, since I'm not able to pay back the capital, neither am I paying the interest, you'll give me half of your farmland of cassava. And yet, of course, the value of the half of the farm cassava is about 10 times how much I owe you. But you still take it anyways, right? So what is that doing to me? It means that you're crippling my economy. You're crippling my chances of ever paying you back. I don't know if I'm painting this picture clearly. Yeah. But this is what the West is doing. So this is the predatory lending that I'm talking about. They give you monies that you don't need, knowing that African politicians are corrupt and they're going to steal these monies. They're not going to invest the monies in industries. They're not going to invest the money in growing their African economies. They're actually going to steal a good chunk of this money put them in buying jets and building $21 billion naira vice presidential apartments, spending 100 million in buying jets and all of that. If you borrow to spend, if you borrow to eat, that means poverty will be your name. It's a wrong idea to borrow for consumption. The idea of borrowing is that you borrow and you invest it in money-making, ventures that will actually give you the money to pay back the loan and make you some profit. So these IMF and World Bank understands that African politicians are corrupt, and so this is why they use this tactic, right, to actually get you trapped. And so this is why Nigeria is trapped today. If you look at how much Nigeria is owing the IMF, is very huge. And we're not just owing IMF, we're also owing China, right? And these people keep giving us money. Now, the problem is that our politicians are not only corrupt, they are also not lettered. Because if somebody is going to give you a loan and there's a contract to sign, you're supposed to take that contract home, sit down, study the contract, see all the clauses in the contract, see if there's anything that ties you into something that you're not supposed to be tied into. But they don't do that. Now, I want to surprise you that all of these international lenders put clauses in this contract that our leaders don't read. And those clauses state that if it gets to a point where you're not able to pay the principal nor service the interest, that we will come and take your assets in perpetuity. That means they can come and seize the Lagos Seaport. If you're not able to pay IMF now has a right to choose some of the most lucrative, assets you have and come and take them over. So you see why African leaders actually succumb to the West. This is why they actually succumb to the West, because the West choose IMF and World Bank to actually trap them. So this is why if they tell you you have to accept LGBTs and you know that you owe them so much money, and if you don't pay them money, they're probably going to come and seize your assets. You're going to say, okay, if all I need to do is to accept it and actually imbibe it into our laws that people are free to become LGBTs, then we're going to allow that, right? So this is really the problem that's going on in Africa. It's happening in Nigeria. It's happening in Ghana. It's happening in Kenya. You see what happened in Kenya recently.
Yeah.
It was because of this same IMF loans. Kenya took so much money that they're not able to pay back, IMF. So IMF now demanded that they have to increase taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So they decided to tax Kenyan citizens unduly. And so the burden became so much on the citizens that they decided to riot. And that's actually what led to the unrest we saw in Kenya a few weeks ago. It's the IMF. So really the problem of Africa is actually tied to IMF and the World Bank, right? But the quick question is, how are they able to do this to African countries and not to the Western countries? It's because of the corruption that, is synonymous with African leadership, right? African leaders are simply corrupt. They want money, 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 money all the time. And so they end up borrowing monies that they don't need so that they can maintain a lifestyle that they shouldn't be living. And this is why the West is capitalizing on that and really holding Africa down. So you would ask, what is the solution? Mm-hmm. Now, for me, the solution is, first of all, stop taking any more loans.
Okay, number one.
That's number one. A government like the government of Tinubu right now has borrowed a lot of money in just 1 year, and they're still borrowing, right? So number one step is to stop borrowing any more funds, right? Number two, do a data collation of all the natural resources that Nigeria has, right? Open them up for exploration. But give African companies African companies that have the money, the right of first refusal. That is to say, that if we decide that we're going to open up our copper mines or our lithium mines, for investors to come in and invest in them, that means we have to give people like Dangote, for example, or Tedola, or Danta, whoever it is that has the money, right? Who is a Nigerian? These are the people that we have to prioritize and give them these licenses. What that means is that if you give them these licenses, the money they will invest in these mines, make money, and keep their money in Nigeria because they're Nigerian citizens. So they won't take that money to America. They're not Americans. The money will stay within the country and help grow the Nigerian economy, right? So number three is that we have to stop the encroachment of Westerners into the Nigerian economy. Westerners are buying up land all over Africa. Make sure that when they come to do those things, you don't allow them. Don't let them buy land in Nigeria, right? Don't give them licenses to come and mine in Africa. If you must give them licenses, make sure that you're not giving them, undue advantage, where they're able to knock out their competition, right? Let them compete with every other person so that way there'll be a level playing ground for both the Western investors and the local investors. Number four, corruption has to be stamped out of Africa. And that starts from the leadership. The president must not live a corrupt lifestyle. His deputy must not live a corrupt lifestyle, right? Make sure that if anybody is found stealing money, for example, in the last administration, somebody in the civil service stole 80 billion naira. 80 billion naira, I believe, $80 billion. And he's not in jail, right? The Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, the lady, Hadi Sarika or something, was accused as well. She's not in jail, okay? The administration before the last one, the Minister of Petroleum, his name, was accused. Nothing was done. So the thing that happens every time somebody gets away with crime is that it inspires other people to actually commit more crime. So we must put our foot down and punish important people who are caught in crime. So that means that if, for example, Minister of Finance is caught stealing money, we make sure we give him or her a speedy trial and actually jail her 20 years. If you jail a minister 20 years in Nigeria, it sends a strong message that this administration will not tolerate crime. That if you commit crime, no matter who you are, you will be jailed. So if I were President Tinubu right now, right, and I know that my deputy has done something that is illegal, I'll impeach him and make sure that he goes to jail. What better message is there to pass than that one, where you actually jail a top politician in Nigeria for criminal activities? Then you're sending a clear message to Nigerians that crime will not be accepted and Nigerians will begin to sit up. So